After lunch with Julie's family, we drove to her parents' house in Bend, where I spent the night. With Julie's help, we did all my town chores. Dumped trash, did laundry, resupplied, showered, and of course, had a couple of meals that didn't start out dehydrated. Julie and I must have been back in the car by 6 a.m. the next morning because we were standing at the trailhead on Highway 62 after a 2-hour and 20-minute drive at 8:20.
In Oregon, the trail is largely wooded, following the somewhat gentle crest of the Cascade Range. Open areas provide commanding views of volcanic peaks and glaciers.
I elected to take the Crater Lake alternate, which means after just 2.1 miles, I left the PCT. Then it was another 2.3 miles to the Rim Village. Those last 2 miles were crazy boggy. All the snow had recently melted and the mosquitoes were going crazy. They sucked the blood right through the bandage Julie put on me that morning. They were also able to stick me right through the material of my shirt. I had an early lunch above the gift shop and cafe with a view of the lake. I went over to the visitor center. Out front were trolleys taking people on a tour of the rim. I grabbed a Gatorade to go and started the 9 miles along the rim to get back to the PCT. When I got to the rim, I was relieved. I'd heard the entire crater was going to be full of smoke blown in from a fire near the coast. But instead, it could not have been more perfect. It was a little shocking to see so many people. While I was hiking along the rim, I kept getting updates. My nephew and his wife were having their first girl. I loved the views, but it was getting annoying. Hiking up to the vista, then back down to the road, and repeating. It happened 9 times, or would have, if I had not road walked the last one. I had 9 miles to walk from where I rejoined the PCT to an epic water cache. There are 2 of these in this dry stretch. Here I met Stagecoach, a retired judge that hiked the Appalachian Trail something like 35 years earlier and was now doing the PCT in a series of lashes. At the water cache, I found out a bunch of people trolley blazed the rim. That is, they got on the trolley at the visitor center, got off at various viewpoints, and at the turnaround point, jumped off and continued their hike. That would have removed 6 miles. It's a good thing I didn't know about it. I don't know if I could have resisted the temptation. After dinner or fill up the water cache, I kept going a couple of miles to camp in a stealth site I had read about in Far Out. That knocked about 1,000 feet off of the morning's climb to Mount Thielsen. It took only one day, and albeit a 29-mile day, of walking in Oregon to make my feet this filthy. Up early and climbing to Mount Thielsen. At the Mount Thielsen saddle, I met an older couple that were going straight up the mountain. I had breakfast at a creek after coming down from the saddle. Everyone from the water cache rolled by me eventually as I was cooking and eating. Seems Oregon wanted you to know that their highest point on the PCT was higher than Washington's highest point. I figured this would be a good place to call Julie, but the calls kept getting cut off. Even though it was the highest point on the PCT in Oregon, there were mountains higher on 3 sides. I camped at the second epic water cache at mile 1879 after a 28-mile day. The spot included first aid supplies, batteries for charging my devices, and even mosquito repellent in the form of 30% DEET wipes. I started using them going forward. Not as powerful as my Benz 100 spray, but so much more convenient. I researched the trail ahead, and everyone was complaining that there was no water all the way to Shelter Cove Resort. A few people recommended an alternate route along the Metalius Wendigo Trail. The MW was actually part of the PCT historically. It is still part of the equestrian version of the PCT. The alternate would supposedly remove 10 miles and had plenty of water. I had no way to confirm the distance, but I was able to download a GPX file from the route and load it into Gaia GPS. According to Far Out, it was 28 miles to Shelter Cove, so if I knocked off 10 miles, I could have lunch there. That sounded pretty good. I got going at 6 a.m. This was the first smoky day. Not bad, the sky wasn't so clear, and every so often you got a whiff of smoke. I got a 10 by 10, so I was in high spirits. The Whitefish Horse Camp was pretty impressive. I got a 20 by 2 and I was nowhere near Shelter Cove. Perhaps the 10 miles cutoff was just to the road where you could get a ride to Shelter Cove. So I jumped onto the 429 where the trail crossed it and headed towards Highway 58, where I was sure I could get a ride. While I was still on the 429, I was trying to get an Uber when a car drove up. The driver worked at Bigfoot Tavern in the nearby town of Crescent. He had to make a quick call, but then he'd be happy to drive me to Shelter Cove, which was 10 miles by car. So in the end, it was a shortcut. On the way, he told me about a woman who used to live nearby. She'd steal all the supplies at the water cache, post on Far Out how the MW was better, and then offer to give people rides to Shelter Cove. Once she had riders in the car, she'd insist on $2 per mile, and if the amount wasn't acceptable, she'd drop off the hiker even farther from their destination. Dastardly. It was because of this he started giving people rides. I offered to pay for my ride, but he insisted I keep my money. He even offered me a hard seltzer, but I could get whatever I wanted at Shelter Cove, so I passed. When we got to Shelter Cove, he saw another hiker leaving for the trail, and he gave her a ride. Wow. If you're ever in Crescent, drop by the Bigfoot Tavern and say thanks for me. Shelter Cove seemed to have a vibrant hiking community. I got water and washed my feet in the lake, but the highlight was lunch, a whole pizza to myself, plus a couple of beers and ice cream. Crossing the 58 to get back on the trail was dicey. At the trail, I had discovered a shelter full of volcanic cinders that the Oregon Department of Transportation uses to de-ice the roads. My kindly driver must have left these hard seltzers for us hikers at the trail's first marker. In the end, I ended up drinking one after all. From the marker to my camp spot, it was another 11 miles. That had a lot to do with me meeting Short Pants. He had a really good pace, so I matched his. The miles just fly by when you meet someone new and they want to talk. He had just graduated college with a degree in finance. He had to take a long break from college a couple of years ago to battle cancer, but he beat it. After the trail, he's going to go back to school to become a lawyer and hope to work with mergers and acquisitions. He's just a couple of years older than my boys and seems so squared away. At 8 p.m., I pulled off the trail into a little stealth site, and Short Pants kept going. He was doing long, fast days, so I would never see him again. I hiked over 30 miles, but thanks to the ride up the entire length of Odell Lake, I managed to knock off 41 trail miles. I would never again do that many trail miles in a single day. I got up, packed, and got going by 6 a.m. I stopped for breakfast with a great view of Charlton Lake. I spent 5 miles in the worst burn yet. The area had been burned at least twice recently. Everything was dead. There wasn't even patches of grass. I got 10 by 10 and a 20 by 2. At one point, I decided if I really pushed myself, I could break my mileage record. If I could get 35 miles, Julie could pick me up a day early near Elks Lake Resort. This way, I could get a full zero in Bend, and wouldn't that be nice? A switch was flipped, and the forest went from burnt out to green and luscious. I passed pond after pond. Another first for me. I got 30 by 3 plus 3. I would have said 6, but then there wouldn't have been any alliteration. I was really dragging those last 5 miles. When I got to the car, Julie wasn't there. She decided to hike a bit on the PCT too. We ran into each other in the woods, walked to the car, and was heading to her parents' house by 7:30. I hit Taco Bell real hard on the way though. Trail stop checklist. Crater Lake, check. Shelter Cove, check. Elk Lake, check. Trail check.